Hi everyone, I'm Alexander Hoff and I'm going to be speaking about the complicated relationship between rivers and humans, and specifically how meandering rivers play both a literal and allegorical role in this relationship. Let's start by discussing how civilization ties in with the significance of rivers. China, one of the oldest and most powerful countries, derives almost all of its early culture from the Yangtze and Yellow rivers. Civilizations existed in these river valleys thousands of years before recorded history, but the first traditional dynasty began sometime around 2070 BC. There's little recorded evidence to support these events, but ancient Chinese texts trace this history to the flooding of the Yellow River. Gun, the grandson of the legendary Yellow Emperor, was tasked by Emperor Yao with stopping the flooding. He constructed large levees to block the water from flooding on either side of the river. This worked for 9 years, but the levees collapsed and killed many people as the flood strengthened over the years. After Gun was exiled to the Yushan Mountains for his mistake, his son, Yu the Great, took up his father's work to stop the flooding. He gathered people from different tribes and had them build canals from the flooding rivers to the sea. It took him 13 years to successfully stop the floods, but when he did, he became the leader of the surrounding tribes. The increased agricultural production strengthened Yu's power even more, and he was chosen as the successor to the emperor, beginning the Zhai dynasty, or the first theoretical dynasty of China. Almost 4,000 years later, China is still around. We can take away many things from this timeless story, regardless of whether all of it was historically accurate. We can see that humans can overcome nature through willpower. We can also see that control of rivers, whether that be physically or politically, is a power great enough to ensure the survival of civilizations for millennia. So with this, we now understand the necessitude of rivers to humans, along with, of course, the drinking water needs and transportation. The people of ancient China, however, paid little attention to the long-lasting consequences of their actions on the environment and ultimately upon themselves. The powerful Yellow River that was seemingly domesticated by Yu the Great is the same one that was intentionally flooded to stop the Japanese military, destroying thousands of villages and killing up to 900,000 people. Likewise, the daunting yet beautiful Yangtze River, home to the Baiji dolphin and almost all of China's social customs, is the same river thousands of years later. However, you may not be able to tell this by looking at the massive concrete dam stretching across it nowadays, or the 400 million people living on it, or even by the lack of dolphins. Rivers are understandably dynamic, but they appear to be even more so than other facets of our life. I believe I've gone on long enough about humans now, so let's focus entirely on the rivers themselves. All a river is naturally tasked with is carrying sediment to the ocean with the help of gravity, of course. Along the way, they enjoy passing the time by eroding their banks. Eventually, because of this, they start to curve and bend. And when the stream erodes sediment from the outer bends, it deposits those sediments on the inner bends of downstream curves, creating a cycle known as meandering. Physically, meandering is the stable form of a river used to maintain equilibrium. We'll use the same term to allegorically refer to the same phenomenon, but in a broader sense involving the effects of meandering. Some of these effects include creating diverse aquatic habitats and good fishing spots. In addition, meandering controls the speed of a river and allows species to comfortably survive. The banks of meandering rivers are packed with vegetation that prevents erosion and improve water quality by absorbing nitrogen and other nutrients. Of course, many wild, naturally occurring meandering rivers are subject to flooding, and some may not be navigable. In cases like this, many rivers are subjected to control methods such as dams and levees. In a modern context, this equates to easier navigation and longer ships, which means less trips and shorter distances to travel, thus faster turnaround time on trips, which improves trade. Also, hydroelectric power generation is generally seen as a renewable and clean alternative to fossil fuels, and flooding is seemingly easier to control with controlled rivers. On the contrary, however, various species may suffer habitat destruction or even decimation while floodplains change, affecting agriculture. Overfishing becomes easier, and the discharge of affluent and industrial waste simply flows down the river and into the sea. Of course, it's imprudent to ignore the success stories of some heavily controlled rivers. The Thames River is recently seeing seahorses and seals again after being declared biologically dead 60 years ago. Also, the Chicago River, which has been artificially reversed in 1900, went from fewer than 10 species of fish in 1970 to over 70 species today due to improvements in water quality and marine habitats. These cases, unfortunately, are relatively uncommon and are more so becoming one-offs as global warming compounds the issues facing these rivers. Many experts understand the challenges produced by over-controlled rivers and share the sentiment of reintroducing nature to them. A solution to this is artificially creating and maintaining meandering rivers. Interestingly, it doesn't seem to be very hard to replicate or even create a meandering stream, since such phenomenons appear similar to fractals. By that I mean larger meandering rivers exhibit almost identical behavior to smaller meandering rivers or tributaries. However, creating circumstances to speed up the process are what makes such an effort difficult. A group of researchers from UC Berkeley recently conducted flume experiments in which they observed that the deficiency of fine sediment can lead to cutoffs in the stream and decrease the sinuosity of the meanders. However, contrary to previous beliefs, the fine sediment doesn't need to flood the riverbanks in order to create a meandering pattern. Instead, the desired meandering effect can be achieved by slightly submerging channel margins and negating a high risk of flooding. While this research is challenging, it is incredibly rewarding in that understanding meandering rivers and allowing a sort of controlled chaos may just be what we need to let sustainable ecosystems and human activity coexist.